2 years later, Jake stood once again on the observation deck of Shadowbane Station, watching as the latest class of Guardian Corps graduates received their assignments. Among them was Zara Thex, now a full commander leading a mixed-species fleet. Kadaesh's protege, a young Thrakani warrior named Kethval, was taking command of a humanitarian mission to the war-torn Epsilon sector. "The students have become teachers," Echo observed with satisfaction. "The cycle continues." Jake nodded, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. The galaxy was far from perfect, and the Vextai threat still existed. But something fundamental had changed. Hope was no longer dependent on a single ship or a single pilot. That evening, Jake received a private message from Dr. Lisa Grant on Haven Prime. The planet he had saved over 3 years ago had become a center for refugee resettlement and cultural exchange. Grant's message included a video from a ceremony honoring the anniversary of the battle that had saved their world. Children who had been too young to remember the attack were now studying alongside alien students, learning about cooperation and peaceful coexistence. Adults who had witnessed the Shadowbane's intervention were teaching their children that sometimes, when things seem hopeless, help can come from the most unexpected places. As Jake watched the ceremony, he realized that this was the real victory, not the military defeat of the Vextai, but the creation of a galaxy where different species could work together toward common goals. "You have done well, Jake Morrison," Echo said quietly. "The Keth Mori would be proud." Jake smiled, feeling the weight of responsibility that had. Captain Vextar stood on the bridge of the Kethmaran, watching the stars slowly drift past the large viewing window. The ship moved through the empty space between galaxies, far from any known worlds or space routes. This was exactly where they wanted to be. The Zalani research team had come here to study the dark matter that filled the void, hoping to learn secrets that could advance their already impressive technology. The Keth Moran was a beautiful ship, grown rather than built. Like all Zalani vessels, it had smooth curves and a living hull that could heal small damages by itself. Inside, everything worked perfectly. The air was always clean and fresh. The temperature never changed. The lights adjusted themselves to match the crew's daily cycles. It was a marvel of engineering that most species in the galaxy could only dream of creating. Vextar felt proud of his ship and his crew. The Zalani Federation was one of the most advanced civilizations in known space. Their technology was so far ahead of other species that they rarely bothered to make contact with. Lesser races, why would they? Most aliens were still struggling with basic space travel, while the Zalani had mastered faster-than-light drives, matter conversion, and biological engineering. The captain walked over to where Chief Scientist Keldan was working at her station. Her long fingers moved quickly over the bioneural interface, studying readings from the ship's sensors. The data streams showed patterns in the dark matter that surrounded them, information that would take months to fully understand. "How are the studies going?" Vexitar asked. "Very well, Captain," Keldan replied without looking up. "We are finding structures in the dark matter that we never expected. This data will keep our scientists busy for years." Suddenly, the ship shuddered. It was just a small vibration, but on a Zalani vessel, any unexpected movement was cause for concern. The living hull should have absorbed any minor impacts from space debris. "What was that?" Vexitar demanded. Before anyone could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The soft, musical tones that normally announced minor issues were replaced by harsh warnings that the Zalani rarely heard. Navigation Officer Yix quickly checked his displays, his face growing pale. "Captain, we have a major problem with the quantum drive," Yix reported. "Something has gone wrong with the primary containment field." Vexitar felt his heart sink. The quantum drive was the most complex part of their ship. It allowed them to travel faster than light by folding space around the vessel, but it was also dangerous. If the containment field failed completely, the drive could tear the ship apart. "Get Chief Engineer Nira to the drive chamber immediately," Vexitar ordered. Within minutes, Nira's voice came over the communication system. Her usual calm tone was replaced by obvious worry. "Captain, the situation is very bad," she reported. "The containment field is failing and I had to shut down the entire drive system to prevent an explosion. We are dead in space." "Can you repair it?" Vexitar asked, though he already feared the answer. "I am trying, but the damage is extensive. The quantum resonance chamber has cracked, and several bioneural pathways have been severed. We would need a full shipyard to fix this properly." Vexitar closed his eyes for a moment. They were millions of light years from the nearest Zalani base, in a region of space that no one ever traveled through. Their communication systems could send messages across vast distances, but even at faster-than-light speeds it would take weeks for help to arrive. "What about our other systems?" he asked. The news got worse. The drive failure had damaged other parts of the ship. The air recycling system was working at only 60% capacity. Food production had stopped completely. The ship's ability to convert energy into matter for repairs was offline. "How long can we survive?" Vexitar asked quietly. Engineer Nira was silent for a long moment. "If we reduce all non-essential functions and put half the crew into emergency sleep, perhaps 2 weeks, maybe 3 if we are very careful." The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. The Kethmaran was one of the most advanced ships ever built, but it was designed for efficiency, not survival. Unlike the crude vessels used by primitive species, it had very few backup systems. The Zalani had always believed their technology was too advanced to fail. "Send out a distress call," Vexitar ordered. "Use all frequencies and maximum power. Someone might hear us." Yix began broadcasting their emergency signal into the vast emptiness of space. The message was simple. A Zalani research vessel was stranded and needed immediate assistance. They included their location and the nature of their emergency. Hours passed with no response. The crew tried to stay busy, working on repairs that everyone knew were hopeless. The quantum drive needed parts and equipment that simply did not exist on their ship. Even if they had the right materials, the repairs would take months. As the first day ended, Vexitar gathered his crew in the main conference room. 12 Zalani scientists and officers looked at him with worried faces. These were some of the brightest minds in their civilization, but none of them had an answer to their current problem. "We must face the truth," Vexitar said. "Our ship cannot be repaired with what we have. Our only hope is rescue, but we are in an area of space that no one visits. The chances of another ship finding us are very small." Scientist Keldan spoke up. "Perhaps we should consider using the escape pods. They have their own life support systems." "And go where?" Engineer Nira asked. "We are between galaxies. The nearest star system is thousands of light years away. The pods do not have faster-than-light drives. We could put ourselves into deep sleep and hope someone finds the pods," suggested Yix. Vexitar shook his head. The pods' communication systems have very limited range. No one would hear their distress signals either. The meeting ended with no solutions. The crew returned to their duties, but everyone knew they were just waiting for a rescue that probably would never come, waiting for their air to run out, waiting to die in the cold emptiness between the stars. 3 days passed. The air was getting thinner, and everyone moved more slowly to conserve oxygen. The food dispensers had stopped working completely, and they were surviving on emergency rations that tasted terrible and provided barely enough nutrition. The distress signal continued broadcasting automatically, sending their plea for help into the void. But space was vast and empty, and their voices seemed lost in the infinite darkness that surrounded them. On the 4th day of their crisis, Captain Vextar sat alone on the bridge. Most of his crew was resting to save oxygen, and the ship felt like a tomb. The lights had been dimmed to conserve power, casting long shadows across the bioorganic walls. The Kethmaran, once a symbol of Zalani superiority, now felt like a beautiful coffin drifting through space. The distress signal continued its automatic broadcast, but Vextar had little hope left. In 3 days, they had not received even a single response. Not from the Zalani Federation, not from any of the other advanced civilizations, not even from space pirates who might want to steal their technology. The void between galaxies was truly empty. Vextar was reviewing their remaining supplies when Navigation Officer Yix suddenly looked up from his station with surprise. His usually calm expression showed confusion and disbelief. "Captain," Yix said slowly, "I am receiving a response to our distress call." Vextar felt his heart jump. "From who? Is it a Federation ship?" "No, sir. The signal is coming from." "This cannot be right." Yix checked his instruments again. "The transmission identifies itself as a human vessel." "Human?" Vextar stood up quickly. "That is impossible. Humans are barely capable of interstellar travel. What would they be doing out here?" "I do not know, Captain, but they are requesting permission to communicate directly." Vexatar hesitated. Humans were not completely unknown to the Zalani, but they were considered a very primitive species. Their technology was thousands of years behind Zalani advancement. They had only recently developed faster-than-light travel, and their ships were crude metal constructions that barely qualified as spacecraft by Zalani standards. But they were the only ones who had answered. "Open the channel," Vextar ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of what was obviously a human vessel. The contrast with the Kethmaran was shocking. Where the Zalani ship had smooth, living surfaces and soft lighting, the human bridge was all sharp angles, exposed metal, and harsh artificial lights. Everything looked rough and hastily assembled. A human male appeared on the screen. He had short brown hair and wore a simple blue uniform that looked more like work clothes than a proper military outfit. When he spoke, his accent was strange, and he struggled with some of the words in Galactic Standard. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the cargo freighter Liberty Bell," the human said. "We received your distress call. Are you in need of assistance?" Vexatar was momentarily speechless. The idea of needing help from such a primitive species was both embarrassing and humbling. But his crew was dying, and pride would not save them. "I am Captain Vextar of the Zalani research vessel Kethmoran," he replied formally. "We have suffered a critical system failure and are stranded. Our life support is failing." "Understood, Captain," Morrison said without hesitation. "We are approximately 6 hours away at maximum burn. Can you hold out that long?" "Yes, we should be able to survive until then," Vextar answered, though he was not entirely certain. "Good. We will be there as soon as possible." Liberty Bell out. The screen went dark, leaving the Zalani Bridge in stunned silence. Chief Scientist Keldan had arrived during the conversation and was staring at the blank screen with amazement. "A human ship," she said quietly. "Out here, in the deep void. How is that possible?" "I do not know," Vextar admitted, "but they are our only hope." Over the next several hours, the crew prepared for the arrival of their rescuers. Many of them had never seen humans before, except in scientific databases. The records described them as a young species, aggressive and unpredictable, with technology that was impressive for their age, but still very basic compared to advanced civilizations. When the Liberty Bell finally appeared on their sensors, the Zalani crew gathered on the bridge to see it. The human ship was exactly what they had expected. A boxy, ungraceful vessel that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts. Its hull was covered with patches and modifications, and it moved through space with the subtle vibrations of primitive engines. "Look at that thing," Engineer Nira said with barely concealed disgust. "How does it even stay in one piece?" "It is functional," Vexatar said diplomatically, though he privately agreed with her assessment. The Liberty Bell positioned itself near the Catamaran, and Captain Morrison's voice came through their communications again. "We are in position, Captain Vextar. Request permission to come alongside and assess your situation." "Permission granted," Vextar replied. Through the viewing window, they could see the human ship extending what appeared to be a docking tube. The device looked crude and potentially dangerous, nothing like the elegant biomechanical systems the Zalani used. But it seemed to work, creating a sealed connection between the two vessels. "Our engineer would like to come aboard and take a look at your drive system," Morrison said. "She has experience with quantum mechanics and might be able to help." Vextar almost laughed. A human engineer understanding Zalani quantum technology was like expecting a child to repair a master craftsman's work. But what choice did they have? "Very well. We will meet your engineer at the airlock." A few minutes later, the airlock opened to reveal two humans. The first was a woman with black hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She wore the same rough uniform as her captain and carried a large metal box that presumably contained tools. The second was a man with kind eyes who introduced himself as Tony Garcia, their medical officer. The woman stepped forward confidently. "I am Lisa Park, chief engineer of the Liberty Bell. Captain Morrison asked me to see what I can do to help." Vextar studied her carefully. She was young by Zalani standards, and her equipment looked primitive. But there was something in her eyes, a determination and confidence that impressed him despite himself. "I am Captain Vextar. I must warn you, our technology is quite advanced. It may be beyond your understanding." Lisa smiled, showing white teeth. "Well, Captain, I have always been good at figuring things out. Mind if I take a look?" As they walked through the corridors of the Catamaran toward the engine room, Vextar noticed how the humans reacted to their ship. They seemed genuinely amazed by the bioorganic walls and the seamless integration of living and mechanical systems. But they did not seem intimidated or overwhelmed, just curious and impressed. "This is incredible," Lisa said, running her hand along a wall. "The ship is actually alive, is not it? I have read about bioengineering, but I have never seen anything like this." "Yes," Vextar replied, feeling a small surge of pride. "The Catamaran was grown in our shipyards over a period of 5 years. Every system is integrated with living tissue that can adapt and self-repair. Then why could not it fix itself when the quantum drive failed?" Lisa asked. It was a simple question, but it struck at the heart of the problem. The Zilani had created ships so advanced and specialized that they could not adapt when something went seriously wrong. The damage was too extensive for the ship's natural healing abilities, Vexitar explained, though the answer sounded weak even to him. They reached the engine room, where engineer Nira was waiting with obvious skepticism. She showed Lisa the massive quantum drive chamber, pointing out the cracked resonance field and the severed bio-neural pathways that controlled the system. Lisa walked around the chamber slowly, asking questions and taking notes on a simple electronic tablet. Her questions were basic, but showed a surprising understanding of the underlying principles. "Interesting," she said finally. "The theory is actually similar to what we use, just much more advanced. The problem is that your system is too integrated. When one part fails, it brings down everything connected to it." "That is the point," Nira said stiffly. "Integration allows for maximum efficiency." "Sure," Lisa agreed. "But it also means you cannot work around problems. Our ships are less efficient, but they are also more flexible." She opened her toolbox and began pulling out equipment that looked ancient compared to Zilani instruments. But as she started to work, something amazing happened. The primitive human engineer began to understand their advanced technology and started thinking of ways to fix it. Captain Morrison floated through the docking tube that connected the Liberty Bell to the alien vessel. This was his first time meeting another intelligent species, and he felt both excited and nervous. Behind him, Tony Garcia carried a medical kit, ready to help if the aliens needed immediate care. The airlock of the Kethmaran opened with a soft hiss, and Morrison got his first look at a real alien. Captain Vexistar was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large, dark eyes. His movements were graceful and controlled, and he wore robes that seemed to shift color in the light. Everything about him suggested intelligence and advanced civilization. "Welcome aboard the Kethmaran," Vextar said in careful but clear galactic standard. "I am Captain Vextar of the Zilani Federation." "Thank you for receiving us," Morrison replied, trying to match the alien's formal tone. "I am Jake Morrison, Captain of the Liberty Bell. This is Tony Garcia, our medical officer." Vextar looked them up and down with obvious curiosity. Morrison knew they must seem primitive to such an advanced species. His uniform was practical work clothes, not fancy robes. His ship was held together with repairs and modifications, not grown from living materials, but they were here, and they were offering help. "Before we begin," Morrison said, "do any of your crew need immediate medical attention? Tony here is trained in emergency care." "That is kind of you to offer," Vextar replied, "but our medical needs are currently stable. However, our life support systems are failing. We have perhaps days before the situation becomes critical." Tony stepped forward with his medical scanner, a simple device that looked crude next to the alien technology surrounding them. "Would you mind if I checked the air quality? I want to make sure it is safe for us to work here for extended periods." Vextar looked surprised by the question. "Of course, though I should warn you that our atmosphere may be different from what you are used to." Tony ran his scanner and checked the readings. "Actually, it is very close to what we breathe. The oxygen level is a bit low, but that explains why you are having life support problems. We can work here safely." As they walked through the ship, Morrison was amazed by what he saw. The walls curved and flowed like they were inside a living creature. Lights appeared when they needed them and faded when they passed. Control panels emerged from surfaces when approached and disappeared when not in use. It was beautiful and far beyond anything humans had achieved. But Morrison also noticed things that worried him. The ship was too quiet. On the Liberty Bell, You could always hear the hum of engines, the flow of air through vents, the sounds of a vessel working to keep its crew alive. Here, everything was silent and smooth, which meant that when things went wrong, they went very wrong. They entered what was obviously the bridge, and Morrison met the rest of the crew. Each alien was introduced with their full name and title, which Morrison tried to remember, though the names were difficult for human pronunciation. The aliens, in turn, seemed fascinated by the humans, studying them with barely concealed curiosity. Chief Scientist Keldan asked the most questions. Your species has only recently achieved faster-than-light travel, correct? What brings you so far from your homeworlds? Morrison smiled. Cargo run. We are carrying supplies to the colonies in the Kepler sector. Not the most exciting job, but it pays the bills. You travel between galaxies for commerce? Vextar asked, sounding amazed. Not between galaxies? Morrison laughed. We are not that advanced yet, but our route took us close to this region, and we picked up your distress call. How did you detect our signal from so far away? Navigation Officer Yix wanted to know. Tony answered this one. Our communications officer rigged up some modifications to our sensor array. She likes to listen to radio signals from space. Says you never know what interesting things you might hear. The aliens exchanged glances. Morrison could tell they were surprised that humans would modify their equipment so casually. Everything on their ship seemed designed to work perfectly as intended, with no room for creative changes. Speaking of our crew, Morrison said, would it be possible for our engineer to examine your drive system? Lisa is very good at solving mechanical problems. Vextar hesitated. Your offer is generous, but our quantum drive technology is quite advanced. I am not sure your engineer would understand the principles involved. Morrison kept his voice polite, but he felt a slight sting from the alien's words. He knew humans were less advanced than many species, but they were not stupid. Lisa has worked with quantum mechanics before, he said. At the very least, she might be able to offer a fresh perspective on the problem. After some discussion among the aliens, Vextar agreed to let Lisa examine their engine. Morrison could tell the captain was being polite rather than hopeful, but that was fine. Lisa had surprised people before with her ability to understand and fix complex systems. As they waited for Lisa to arrive, Morrison tried to learn more about the aliens and their situation. The Zilani were clearly an advanced civilization, but they seemed to have some blind spots. Their ship was a marvel of engineering, but it had very few backup systems. When the main drive failed, they had no alternatives. On human ships, Morrison explained, we always have multiple ways to do important things. If the main engine fails, we have backup engines. If those fail, we have emergency thrusters. If everything fails, we have ways to fix things with spare parts and improvised solutions. Engineer Nira looked puzzled. But that would make your ships much less efficient. Why carry backup systems when your primary systems are designed not to fail? Because things do fail, Tony said simply. In our experience, if something can go wrong, it eventually will. So, we plan for it. The aliens considered this. Morrison could see they found the human approach crude and wasteful, but they were beginning to understand why it might be useful in a situation like this. When Lisa arrived, with her toolkit, the contrast between human and alien engineering became even more obvious. Her tools were simple and mechanical: wrenches, screwdrivers, electronic meters, and diagnostic devices that used basic principles. The alien tools were elegant biomechanical interfaces that seemed to think for themselves. But as Lisa began examining the damaged quantum drive, something interesting happened. She asked simple questions that the aliens had not thought to ask. She looked at problems from angles they had not considered. And slowly, she began to understand how their advanced system worked. "This is really impressive," she said, studying the quantum resonance chamber. "The way you use bio-neural pathways to control the field harmonics is brilliant. We use computer systems for this, but your living components can adapt in real time." Engineer Nira looked pleased by the compliment, but also confused. "If you understand the principles, why do humans not use similar technology?" Lisa shrugged. "We are not advanced enough yet. But also, we learned early on that simpler systems are often more reliable. Your bio-neural pathways are amazing, but what happens when they get damaged?" "The ship's healing systems repair them," Nira explained. "But what if the healing systems are also damaged? What if the injury is too severe for natural repair?" Nira had no answer. It was clear that the Zilani had never seriously considered this possibility. Their technology was so advanced that they had assumed it would never face problems they could not solve. Lisa continued her examination, taking measurements and making notes. Morrison watched the aliens watching her, and he could see their attitudes slowly changing. At first, they had looked at the humans with polite condescension, the way adults might watch children playing with toys. But as Lisa demonstrated her understanding of their technology, they began to show genuine respect. "I think I might be able to help," Lisa said finally. "The damage is serious, but it is not hopeless. I cannot fix your bio-neural pathways. That is beyond my knowledge. But I can create a bypass system using components from our ship. It will not be as elegant as your original design, but it should work." Vextar looked skeptical. "You want to attach human technology to our quantum drive?" "Temporarily," Lisa assured him. "Just to get you moving again. Once you reach a proper shipyard, your engineers can remove my modifications and repair everything properly." It was not the solution the aliens had hoped for. They clearly preferred to be rescued by their own advanced technology, not saved by primitive human engineering. But their options were limited, and time was running out. "How long would such repairs take?" Vextar asked. "Hard to say without getting started," Lisa replied. "Maybe 12 hours, maybe more. Depends on what parts we need to fabricate." Morrison could see the alien captain struggling with his decision. Pride fought against practicality, and practicality was winning. Finally, Vextar nodded. "Very well. Please proceed, Engineer Park. We are grateful for your assistance." As Lisa began gathering the tools and materials she would need, Morrison felt a sense of satisfaction. This was why humans went to space, not just to explore and trade, but to help others when they could. It did not matter that the aliens were more advanced, or that they looked down on human technology. People were in trouble, and humans knew how to solve problems. Lisa Park stood in the engine room of the Kethmaran, surrounded by technology that was centuries ahead of anything humans had built. The quantum drive chamber rose before her like a cathedral of living metal and organic circuits. Bio-neural pathways pulsed with faint light, or at least they had before the accident. Now, many of them were dark and severed. Engineer Nira watched nervously as Lisa opened her toolkit. The human tools looked ancient compared to the elegant Zilani instruments. Lisa pulled out a handheld scanner that beeped and clicked as it took readings, a far cry from the silent biosensors the aliens used. "The crack in the resonance chamber is the main problem," Lisa said, pointing to a hairline fracture that ran through the crystalline heart of the drive. But the real issue is that your control systems are too integrated. When the chamber cracked, it sent feedback through all the bio-neural pathways at once. Yes, Nira agreed. The ship's nervous system was overloaded. Many pathways were burned. Out completely. Lisa nodded and pulled out what looked like a roll of silver tape. Several Zilani crew members had gathered to watch, and they stared at the primitive repair material with disbelief. "You are going to fix our quantum drive with tape?" asked Chief Scientist Keldan. "Not exactly," Lisa grinned. "This is plasma conductive mesh. We use it for emergency repairs on power conduits. I am going to create a bypass around your damaged bio-neural pathways." She began working, first using her scanner to map the extent of the damage. The Zilani watched in fascination as she traced circuits and made notes on her simple tablet. Her approach was completely different from their methods. Where they relied on the ship's built-in diagnostic systems, Lisa used external tools to understand. The problem. "Your ship is beautiful," Lisa said as she worked. "But it is like a single organism. Every part depends on every other part. When something goes wrong, the whole system suffers." "That is the elegance of our design," Nira protested. "Perfect integration means perfect efficiency." "Sure, when everything works," Lisa agreed. "But what happens when it does not?" She began installing small devices at various points around the quantum chamber. Each device was crude by Zilani standards, metal boxes with simple electronics inside. But as Lisa connected them with her conductive mesh, they began to form a network around the damaged bio-neural system. "I am creating an independent control circuit," she explained. "It will not be as responsive as your biological systems, but it will be able to manage the basic functions of the quantum drive." The work was slow and methodical. Lisa had to cut into the ship's living hull to reach damaged pathways, and each cut made the Zilani crew wince. Their ship was not just a machine to them. It was a living thing, and they felt its pain. "Does this hurt the ship?" asked Navigation Officer Yix. "A little," Lisa admitted. "But think of it like surgery. Sometimes you have to cause small harm to prevent bigger damage." As she worked, Lisa began to understand more about Zilani technology and culture. Everything they built was perfect and beautiful, but also fragile. They had achieved such a high level of advancement that they had forgotten how to deal with imperfection. "On human ships," Lisa said while splicing a connection, "we expect things to break. So we build everything to be repairable. Every system has backups, and every component can be replaced with spare parts. But that must make your ships much larger and heavier," Nira observed. "Yes, it does. But it also means we can keep flying even when things go wrong." Lisa pulled out a device that made the aliens step back in surprise. It was a welding torch, primitive and dangerous looking. The flame that shot from its tip was crude compared to the precise energy tools the Zilani used. "You are going to use fire on our ship?" Keldan asked nervously. "Just a little," Lisa said cheerfully. "I need to seal some connections, and sometimes the old ways work best." As she worked with the torch, sparks flew and metal glowed hot. The Zilani watched in horror and fascination. Their own repair methods were clean and elegant, using energy, fields, and biomechanical processes. Lisa's approach was messy and primitive, but it was also direct and effective. Hours passed. Lisa worked steadily, occasionally returning to the Liberty Bell to fabricate new components or retrieve additional tools. Each time she came back, she had some new piece of equipment that looked completely out of place in the advanced alien. Ship. Captain Morrison arrived to check on the progress, bringing food and water for Lisa. The simple human rations looked strange next to the elegant Zalani nutrition dispensers, but Lisa ate gratefully. "How is it going?" Morrison asked. "Better than I expected," Lisa replied. "Their technology is amazing, but the principles are not that different from what we use. It is just much more sophisticated." Vextar had been watching the repair work with growing amazement. At first, he had been skeptical and slightly embarrassed to need help from such a primitive species. But as he watched Lisa work, his opinion began to change. The human engineer approached problems differently than any Zalani would. She did not rely on perfect tools or elegant solutions. Instead, she used whatever materials were available and found ways to make them work. When she could not find the right component, she made one. When a connection would not fit properly, she modified it until it did. "Your engineer is quite remarkable," Vextar said to Morrison. "She seems to understand our technology better than some of our own technicians." Morrison felt a surge of pride. "Lisa has always been good at figuring things out. She grew up on a colony world where you had to fix everything yourself or go without." "We do not have such colonies," Vextar admitted. "When Zalani settle new worlds, we bring all the technology they need. Perfect infrastructure from the beginning." "That sounds nice," Morrison said. "But maybe there is something to be said for learning to make do with what you have." As the work continued, more of the crew gathered to watch. They had never seen anything like Lisa's repair methods. She used duct tape to hold components in place while she made permanent connections. She jury-rigged power supplies from spare parts. She created mounting brackets from metal scraps and secured them with bolts that looked crude, but held firmly. "This is not how repairs are supposed to be done," Engineer Nira said, but her voice carried more wonder than criticism. "No," Lisa agreed, "but it works." Finally, after nearly 10 hours of work, Lisa stepped back from the quantum drive chamber. Her makeshift bypass system was complete, a network of human technology grafted onto alien engineering. It looked like a patchwork, all exposed wires and metal boxes connected by silver mesh, but the indicators showed that power was flowing through the new pathways. "Ready to test," Lisa announced. The Zalani crew took their positions nervously. They had never tried to start their quantum drive with such primitive modifications. What if the human technology interfered with their systems? What if the crude repairs caused more damage? "Beginning startup sequence," reported Nira from the main control station. The drive chamber began to glow as energy flowed through Lisa's bypass circuits. The human components hummed and clicked, making sounds that seemed out of place in the quiet Zalani ship. But the readings were good. The quantum field was forming properly. "Field coherence at 60% and rising," Yix called out from his station. 70%, 80%. Field is stable." A cheer went up from the Zalani crew. Their ship was alive again. The quantum drive was working, powered by human ingenuity and alien science working together. "It will not be as smooth as your original system," Lisa warned. "And you will need to monitor the human components carefully. But it should get you home." Captain Vextar looked at the patchwork repair system with new eyes. It was not beautiful by Zalani standards, it was not elegant or perfectly integrated, but it worked, and that was what mattered. "Engineer Park," he said formally, "the Zalani Federation owes you a great debt. You have saved not just our lives, but our ship." Lisa smiled and began packing up her tools. "Just glad I could help. That is what people do for each other, right?" As the crew prepared for departure, Vextar found himself thinking about the human approach to engineering. Maybe there was something his people had lost in their pursuit of perfection. Maybe the ability to improvise and adapt was just as valuable as advanced technology. The humans had saved them not with superior science, but with superior thinking. They had looked at an impossible problem and found a possible solution. And they had done it all because it was the right thing to do. With the quantum drive functioning again, both crews had time to rest and get to know each other. Captain Morrison suggested they share a meal while the Zalani systems finished their startup procedures. It seemed like a good way to celebrate their success and learn more about each other. The Kethmorans' dining area was beautiful, with walls that curved like the inside of a shell and tables that seemed to grow from the floor. But the food dispensers were still not working properly, leaving the aliens with only emergency rations that tasted bland and provided minimal nutrition. "We would be honored to share our food with you," Morrison said. "It is not fancy, but we have plenty." Tony Garcia returned from the Liberty Bell, carrying several containers of human food. When he opened them, the aliens leaned forward with curiosity. The smells were completely foreign to them. Spices and seasonings that their advanced food production systems had never tried to recreate. "This is beef stew," Tony explained, ladling the thick mixture into bowls. "And this is cornbread made from grain we grow on Earth." The Zalani examined the food carefully before tasting it. Their faces showed surprise at the strong flavors and rough textures. Their own food was perfectly balanced for nutrition and easy digestion, but it had no character or variety. Chief Scientist Keldan took a small bite of the stew and her eyes widened. "This has so much flavor. How do you achieve such complexity?" "Cooking," Lisa said simply. "We take basic ingredients and combine them in different ways. Every culture on Earth has its own recipes and techniques." "But why?" asked Engineer Nira. "Would it not be more efficient to simply create food that provides all necessary nutrients in the proper ratios?" Morrison laughed. "Probably. But where? Is the fun in that? Food is not just about nutrition for humans. It is about culture, tradition, and enjoyment." The aliens found this concept strange. In Zalani society, efficiency was the highest goal. They had optimized everything in their lives, including food, for maximum effectiveness. The idea of doing something simply because it was enjoyable was foreign to them. As they ate, Morrison told stories about human space exploration. He described the early missions that had barely made it to their own moon, the first interstellar colonies that had struggled to survive with limited technology, and the gradual expansion that had brought humans to the stars. "We made a lot of mistakes," Morrison admitted. "Lost ships, failed colonies, disasters that could have been prevented with better planning. But we learned from each failure and kept trying." "That seems wasteful," Navigation Officer Yix observed. "Why not develop perfect technology first, then begin exploration?" "Because perfection takes too long," Tony said, "and sometimes you learn more from making mistakes than from getting everything right the first time." Captain Vextar listened to these stories with growing fascination. The human approach to space travel was completely different from the Zalani method. When his people decided to explore, they spent decades developing perfect ships and perfect plans. They rarely failed, but they also took much longer to achieve their goals. "How many colonies do humans have now?" Keldan asked. "About 200 settled worlds," Morrison replied. "Most of them are still pretty rough. Basic infrastructure, limited technology. But people make them work." The Zalani were amazed. Their Own Federation had only 30 worlds, each one a perfect recreation of their homeworld with full technological infrastructure. The idea of living on partially developed planets seemed impossible to them. Lisa pulled out a small device and showed them pictures from her home colony. The images showed buildings that were functional but not beautiful, machines that were patched and repaired, and people working with simple tools to build something better. "This is where I grew up," she said. "New Kansas, about 50 light years from Earth. When we arrived, it was just empty land and basic prefab shelters. Everything we have now, we built ourselves." The pictures showed a world that was clearly still under construction. Roads were unpaved, buildings were mismatched, and equipment looked old and heavily used. But the people in the pictures were smiling, and there was something in their faces that the Zalani recognized: pride and determination. "It does not look very efficient," Nira said carefully, not wanting to offend. "No, it is not," Lisa agreed. "But it is ours. Every building, every machine, every improvement. We made it ourselves. When something breaks, we know how to fix it because we built it in the first place." Morrison began telling them about human values and philosophy. He explained how humans believed in helping others, even strangers, because it was the right thing to do. He described how human society was built on the idea that everyone deserved a chance to succeed, regardless of their background or abilities. "But surely some humans are more advanced than others," Vextar said. "How do you handle the differences in capability?" "We try to help everyone reach their potential," Tony explained. "Someone who is not smart enough to be an engineer might be great at farming or teaching or art. Everyone has something valuable to contribute." This was another concept the Zalani found difficult to understand. Their society was highly stratified, with the most intelligent and capable individuals holding all positions of authority. Those with lesser abilities were cared for, but they were not considered truly valuable. As the conversation continued, the humans learned about Zalani culture as well. They discovered that the aliens lived for hundreds of years, which gave them time to perfect their skills and knowledge. They learned about the Federation's great achievements in science and technology and the beautiful worlds they had created. But they also learned about things the Zalani had lost. In their pursuit of perfection, they had eliminated struggle and challenge from their lives. Every problem had an optimal solution. Every question had a correct answer, and every situation was handled by established procedures. "Do you ever feel like you are missing something?" Morrison asked gently. "I mean, if everything is perfect, where is the excitement? Where is the surprise?" Vextar considered this question for a long time. "We have always believed that unpredictability was a flaw to be corrected. Surprise meant that our planning was inadequate. But surprises can be good too," Lisa said. "Like meeting new people or discovering something unexpected. Some of my best memories are from times when things did not go according to plan." The aliens exchanged glances. They were beginning to understand that the humans possessed something they had lost: a willingness to accept uncertainty and find joy in the unexpected. Keldan asked about human science and discovery. She was surprised to learn that much of human advancement came from curiosity rather than planned research. Humans often studied things simply because they wanted to understand them, not because they had a specific goal in mind. "That seems inefficient," she said. "How do you justify research that has no practical application?" "Sometimes the most practical discoveries come from the most impractical research," Morrison replied. "Besides, knowledge is valuable for its own sake. Understanding the universe makes us better people, even if it does not make us more efficient." As the evening progressed, both groups began to see each other in a new light. The humans realized that the Zilani were not cold or arrogant. They were simply products of a society that valued perfection above all else. The aliens, in turn, began to understand that human primitiveness was actually a different kind of strength. When it came time to return to their respective ships, both crews felt they had gained something valuable. The Zilani had learned about adaptability, determination, and the value of imperfection. The humans had seen what their species might achieve if they continued to grow and develop. Captain Vexitar shook hands with Captain Morrison, a human custom he had quickly learned. "Thank you," he said, "not just for saving our ship, but for showing us a different way of thinking." "Thank you for letting us help," Morrison replied. "It has been an honor to meet you." As the crews prepared for departure, both ships were changed. The Kethmoran carried human modifications that would remind the Zilani of what they had learned. The Liberty Bell carried new knowledge and a sense of accomplishment that would stay with the crew forever. But more than that, both species had discovered that advancement was not just about technology or efficiency. It was about the courage to help others, the wisdom to learn from mistakes, and the strength to keep trying even when the odds seemed impossible. The universe was vast and full of different kinds of intelligence. Perhaps the greatest discovery was that they all had something valuable to offer each other. Both ships were preparing to part ways when Navigation Officer Yix noticed something troubling on his sensors. 3 large vessels were approaching fast from the edge of the system, their energy signatures showing they were heavily armed. "Captain," Yix called out urgently, "we have incoming ships. They do not match any known Federation designs." Captain Vextar hurried to the sensor station and studied the readings. His face grew pale as he recognized the energy patterns. "Kark. Syndicate," he said quietly. "Pirates and slavers." On the Liberty Bell, Captain Morrison received the same warning from his own sensors. The approaching ships were clearly military vessels, built for speed and destruction rather than exploration or commerce. Their design was brutal and functional, with weapons mounted on every available surface. "How long until they reach us?" Morrison asked his navigator. 20 minutes at their current speed," came the reply. Morrison opened a communication channel to the Kethmoran. "Captain Vexitar, are you seeing this?" "Yes, Captain Morrison. I am afraid we have attracted the attention of the Kark Syndicate. They are known for attacking disabled vessels and enslaving the crews. The Kark were a species that had turned to piracy and raiding when their homeworld became uninhabitable. They traveled in fleets, taking what they needed from other civilizations, and selling captives to the highest bidder. Their ships were fast and well-armed, designed for hit-and-run attacks on merchant vessels and isolated colonies. "Can your ship fight?" Morrison asked. "Not in our current condition," Vextar admitted. "Our weapon systems are offline, and we are running on emergency power. The repairs your engineer made restored our drive, but not our defenses." Morrison looked around his own bridge. The Liberty Bell was a cargo freighter, not a warship. They had some defensive weapons, but nothing that could stand against 3 Kark raiders. In a straight fight, they would be destroyed in minutes. "You should leave," Vextar said over the communication channel. "There is no reason for both our ships to be captured. Your vessel is faster. You can escape before they arrive." Morrison was quiet for a moment, considering the options. The smart thing to do would be to run. The Liberty Bell could probably outrun the Kark ships if they left immediately. His crew would be safe, and they could report the location of the alien vessel to human authorities, but that would mean abandoning the Zilani to slavery or death. "Negative, Captain Vexistar," Morrison said firmly. "We are not leaving." Captain Morrison, please be reasonable, Vexitar protested. Your ship cannot fight 3 Kark raiders. You would only be throwing away your lives. Maybe, Morrison agreed. But we do not abandon people who need help. That is not who we are. On the Kethmaran's bridge, the Zelani crew listened to this exchange with amazement. The logical choice was obvious. The humans should save themselves. Their primitive ship had no chance against Kark technology. Staying would accomplish nothing except adding more victims to the pirates' collection. But humans, apparently, did not always make logical choices. Morrison called his crew together for a quick meeting. Lisa Park came up from the engine room, wiping grease from her hands. Tony Garcia arrived from the medical bay where he had been checking their supplies. The rest of the small crew gathered on the bridge. Everyone heard about the incoming pirates, Morrison said. We have maybe 15. Minutes before they get here, I am not going to order anyone to stay and fight. This is volunteer only. Anyone who wants to can take the shuttle and try to get away. The crew looked at each other, and Lisa spoke for all of them. Captain, where you go, we go. Those aliens saved our bacon more than once with their advanced technology. Now it is our turn to return the favor. Even though we will probably lose, Morrison asked. Probably, Tony agreed. But at least we will go down fighting for something that matters. Meanwhile, on the Kethmaran, Chief Scientist Keldan was studying the approaching ships with growing dread. The Kark vessels were heavily shielded and armed with plasma cannons that could tear through most defensive systems. Even a fully functional Zelani warship would have trouble against 3 of them. Perhaps we should try to negotiate, suggested Engineer Nira. The Kark are greedy. Maybe we can offer them something valuable in exchange for our freedom. The Kark do not negotiate, Vextar said grimly. They take what they want and sell what they cannot use. Our advanced technology would be worth a fortune on the black market, and Zelani slaves would bring high prices. The alien captain found himself thinking about the humans' decision to stay. It made no sense from a logical standpoint. They gained nothing by fighting impossible odds, and they risked losing everything. Yet something about their choice filled him with an emotion he had not felt in years. Hope. Captain, called Navigation Officer Yix, the human ship is moving into position between us and the raiders. On the main screen, they could see the Liberty Bell maneuvering to place itself directly in the path of the approaching Kark vessels. The human ship looked tiny compared to the alien raiders, like a small dog standing up to a pack of wolves. Morrison's voice came over the communication channel. Captain Vexitar, we are going to try to buy you some time. If you can get your drive working at full power, you might be able to escape. Captain Morrison, your sacrifice will not be forgotten, Vexitar replied, his voice heavy with emotion. Who said anything about sacrifice? Morrison shot back. We plan to win this fight. The Kark ships continued their approach, spreading out into an attack formation. Their plasma cannons began charging, preparing to destroy the human freighter that dared to stand in their way. On the Liberty Bell, the crew prepared for battle. Lisa rerouted power from non-essential systems to boost their shields and weapons. Tony moved medical supplies to the bridge in case of casualties. The navigator plotted evasive maneuvers while the communications officer sent out a distress call of their own. Remember, Morrison told his crew, we do not need to destroy them. We just need to keep them busy long enough for the Zelani to escape. And then what? Lisa asked. Morrison smiled grimly. Then we improvise. The first Kark ship opened fire, sending streams of plasma toward the Liberty Bell. Morrison threw his ship into a wild, evasive pattern, using every trick he had learned in years of flying through dangerous space. The human ship twisted and turned, barely avoiding the deadly energy beams. "Return fire!" Morrison ordered. The Liberty Bell's weapons were simple kinetic cannons, nothing compared to the advanced energy weapons of the Kark. But they were reliable and accurate, and the human gunners knew how to use them. Solid projectiles slammed into the lead raiders' shields, causing them to flicker and spark. The Kark were surprised by the human ship's aggressive tactics. Most merchant vessels would try to run or surrender when faced with overwhelming force. This primitive freighter was actually fighting back, and fighting effectively. "They are trying to damage our engines," the Liberty Bell's navigator reported. "If they disable our drive, we are finished." "Then we better not let them," Morrison replied, pulling his ship through another impossible maneuver. On the Kethmoran, the Zilani crew watched the battle with growing amazement. The human ship was outnumbered and outgunned, but it refused to give up. Captain Morrison flew his vessel like it was an extension of his own body, dodging attacks that should have been impossible to avoid. "How are they doing that?" Engineer Nira asked in wonder. "Skill," Vextar said simply, "and courage." The humans were buying them time, just as they had promised. But Vextar was beginning to realize that he could not simply abandon these brave people to their fate. The Zilani had always prided themselves on their advanced civilization and moral superiority. How could they claim to be civilized if they ran away while others fought and died to save them? "Begin emergency startup of our defensive systems," he ordered. "Captain, the weapons array is still damaged," Nira protested. "Then fix it," Vextar said firmly. "The humans are fighting for us. The least we can do is fight alongside them." The Liberty Bell shook violently as a plasma blast clipped her starboard hull. Sparks flew from damaged circuits, and the lights flickered throughout the ship. Captain Morrison gripped his command chair as another explosion rocked the vessel. Hull. "Breach on deck 3, reported Tony Garcia from his emergency station. "Sealing blast doors now." The human freighter was taking a beating from the 3 Kark raiders. Despite Morrison's skilled flying, they could not avoid every attack. The enemy ships were faster and more maneuverable, and their weapons were devastating. Each hit weakened the Liberty Bell's shields and damaged her systems. "Captain, our starboard. Engine is offline," Lisa called out from the engine room. "I can reroute power through the secondary systems, but we are losing speed and maneuverability." Morrison cursed under his breath. Without full engine power, they would not be able to keep dodging the Kark attacks much longer. Already, the enemy ships were closing in, preparing for the killing blow. "How much longer do the Zilani need?" he asked. "Their drive signature is getting stronger," the navigator replied. "Maybe 5 more minutes before they can jump to faster than light speed." 5 minutes might as well have been 5 hours. The Liberty Bell would be space debris long before the aliens could escape. The lead Kark raider moved in for the final attack, its plasma cannons glowing with deadly energy. Morrison prepared to execute one last desperate maneuver when something unexpected happened. A brilliant beam of energy lanced out from the Kethmoran, striking the Kark ship's shields with tremendous force. The alien raider staggered under the impact. Its attack disrupted as its captain struggled to understand what had just happened. "The Zilani ship is firing!" exclaimed the Liberty Bell's weapons officer. On the Kethmoran's bridge, Engineer Nira worked frantically at her station. She had managed to restore partial power to their defensive systems, bringing one of their energy cannons online. It was not much, but it was enough to get the Kark pirates' attention. "Target the damaged raider," Captain Vexitar ordered. "All available power to weapons." The Zilani ship's advanced energy cannon fired again, this time punching through the lead raiders' weakened shields. The beam carved a glowing scar across the Kark vessel's hull, destroying weapon emplacements and damaging critical systems. The pirates suddenly found themselves facing two opponents instead of one helpless victim. The primitive human freighter continued its desperate evasive maneuvers, while the advanced alien ship provided long-range fire support. It was not what they had expected. "Captain Morrison," Vextar's voice came over the communication channel. "We cannot abandon you. Whatever happens, we fight together." Morrison felt a surge of respect for the alien captain. Vextar could have escaped by now, but instead he had chosen to stay and fight alongside the humans who had risked everything to save his crew. "Understood, Captain Vextar. Let us show these pirates what happens when they mess with people who stick together." The battle took on a new character with both ships working in coordination. The Liberty Bell continued to draw the Kark Raiders' fire with its aggressive maneuvers, while the Keth Morin struck from long range with its powerful energy weapons. It was an unusual partnership. Primitive human tactics combined with advanced Zalani technology, but the odds were still against them. The Kark had 3 ships to their 2, and their vessels were designed specifically for combat. Worse, the pirates were getting angry. What should have been an easy capture was turning into a real fight, and they were starting to take casualties. "They are calling for reinforcements," reported the Liberty Bell's communications officer. "I am picking up signals to other Kark ships in the area." Morrison's heart sank. If more pirates arrived, even the combined efforts of both ships would not be enough to stop them. Lisa's voice crackled over the intercom from the engine room. "Captain, I have an idea. It is crazy and dangerous, but it might work." "I am listening," Morrison replied, pulling the ship through another evasive turn. "Our cargo hold is full of mining explosives for the Kepler colonies. If we could get close enough to one of the Kark ships, we could detonate the entire cargo bay. The explosion would be big enough to take out a raider." Morrison considered the plan. It would essentially turn the Liberty Bell into a giant bomb, and getting close enough to a Kark ship would be almost impossible. But desperate times called for desperate measures. "Do it," he ordered. "Prep the cargo bay for emergency jettison." Meanwhile, the Keth Moran continued its long-range bombardment. Chief Scientist Keldan had joined Engineer Nira at the weapons station, using her knowledge of energy physics to improve their targeting accuracy. Each shot from their energy cannon weakened the Kark Raiders further. "We are having an effect," Keldan reported. "The damaged raider is falling behind. Its shields are failing." "Continue firing," Vextar ordered. "Give the humans whatever support we can." The Liberty Bell suddenly changed course, accelerating directly toward the wounded Kark Raider. The pirate ship's captain realized what the humans were planning and tried to veer away, but his damaged engines could not respond quickly enough. "This is either going to work or we are all going to die," Morrison muttered. "Cargo bay prepped for jettison," Lisa reported. "On your mark, Captain." The human freighter closed the distance rapidly, ignoring the plasma fire that scorched its hull. Just before impact, Morrison triggered the cargo release, sending tons of mining explosives directly at the Kark ship. "Now!" he shouted, pulling the Liberty Bell into the tightest turn of his career. The explosion lit up space like a new star. The mining charges detonated all at once, creating a ball of fire and debris that consumed the Kark Raider completely. The blast wave caught the Liberty Bell's stern, sending the ship tumbling through space, but Morrison managed to regain control before they crashed into anything. One Kark ship was gone, but 2 remained, and they were furious. The pirates opened, Fire with everything they had, determined to destroy both ships before any more surprises could be sprung. The Kethmoran's shields began to fail under the concentrated assault. Sparks flew from damaged bioneural pathways as the ship's living systems struggled to cope with the overload. "Shields down to 30%, reported Navigation Officer Yix. "We cannot take much more of this." On the Liberty Bell, the situation was even worse. The explosion had damaged their engines further, and several hull breaches were threatening to depressurize the ship. Tony Garcia ran from station to station, sealing emergency bulkheads and treating injured crew members. "Captain, we have lost most of our weapons," the gunner reported. "Only the port cannon is still functional." Morrison looked at the tactical display. 2 Kark raiders against 2 badly damaged ships. The math was not in their favor. But they had come this far, and he was not ready to give up yet. "All power to engines," he ordered. "We are going to ram the second raider." "Captain, that will destroy us too," the navigator protested. "Maybe," Morrison agreed. "But it will also stop them from capturing the Zalani. Sometimes that is the best you can do." Before he could execute the ramming attack, something changed. On the sensors, new energy signatures were approaching at high speed, but these were not Kark reinforcements. "Captain," the communications officer called out excitedly, "I am receiving a transmission. It is the human cruiser Washington, requesting our status." Morrison could hardly believe it. The distress call they had sent out had been answered. A full human naval vessel was coming to their aid, along with 2 escort frigates. The Kark pirates saw the new arrivals and immediately began to retreat. They had expected an easy raid, not a full military engagement. Their damaged ships turned away from the battle, accelerating toward the edge of the system. "Let them go," Morrison ordered, as his weapons officer requested permission to pursue. "We have done enough fighting for one day." As the human naval ships arrived to secure the area, both the Liberty Bell and the Kethmoran floated in space, battered but victorious. They had faced impossible odds and survived through courage, determination, and cooperation. Captain Vextar opened a communication channel to the human freighter. "Captain Morrison, your people fought with honor today. I have never seen such bravery." "You did not do too badly yourself, Captain," Morrison replied. "Thank you for staying to fight with us." The battle was over, but both crews knew that something important had happened. They had proven that cooperation between species was not just possible but powerful. Together they had achieved what neither could have accomplished alone. "I have been thinking about what your engineer said," Vextar told him, "about how human ships are designed to be repaired rather than perfect. There is wisdom in that approach." "Lisa will be happy to hear that," Morrison replied. "She has been worried that your people think we are primitive." "Perhaps we are the primitive ones," Vextar said thoughtfully. "We have advanced technology, but we have lost the ability to adapt when things go wrong. Your people still remember how to survive and overcome challenges." "We learned it the hard way," Morrison admitted. "Made a lot of mistakes getting to where we are. And you will make more mistakes in the future. But you will also learn from them and become stronger. That may be the most advanced trait of all." A few days later, both ships were ready to continue their journeys. The Liberty Bell had been fully repaired and even upgraded with some Zalani technology. The Kethmoran carried human-made backup systems that would prevent them from ever being stranded again. As they prepared to part ways, both crews gathered for a final farewell. The contrast between the two groups was still obvious. The elegant Zalani in their flowing robes, and the practical humans in their work uniforms. But now the differences seemed less important than the similarities. Lisa Park presented Captain Vextar with a small toolkit containing basic human repair equipment. "Just in case," she said with a smile. "Sometimes the simple solutions are the best ones." In return, Keldan gave Morrison a data crystal containing Zilani star charts for unexplored regions of space. "For future adventures," she explained. "The universe is full of wonders waiting to be discovered." Captain Morrison made his final log entry about the encounter as the Liberty Bell prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed. He spoke about meeting a species far more advanced than humanity, but also about learning that advancement meant more than just techno.